Absolutely. Dear Lord, you're a great God. We thank you for creating everything. We thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for the Holy Spirit. We pray, dear Lord, that our minds would be clear and full of wisdom from you so that good decisions could be made for our citizens and that our hearts would be humble and that you'd lead us and direct us in your ways. And we ask that you bless our city. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to talk about the spreadsheets that Dawn helped me hand out, and they are always confusing because Hal Jones makes them. But I will tell you that they're as good as it gets because this is a confusing topic. So the very first one I'm going to talk about says Terrell TIF 2020 to 2007 recap. And basically this is where we stood with our March property tax collections. And so I want to orient you to that. So again, we're going to start on the one that says TIF 2020 to 2007 on top. And you can see our base value there of $128 million. That's where our TIF started. And our taxable value in tax year 2020, so that's your assessed values from January 1, 2020. Those were $317 million, and that gave us a captured value of $188 million. And then you can see all of the math that runs from there, basically meaning that we felt like we would collect just a little bit over $1 million on the city side and a little over $300,000 on the Kaufman County side. The other thing I always like to look at on these is the amounts due to be paid out. Remember, our amounts due to be paid out are all calculated based on actuals received, so that's an important part of what we do. The total received in this period the total received in this period that we're looking at is $1.2 million. So that's that very bottom number down there. And that is a number where you can compare that $628,000 that we had to actually pay out, okay? So 122.77 incoming and $628,000 paid out. Hal, I'm going to ask you a question live and in person here. Did you get a copy of this? Okay. I think that this page has a little confusion on it because I think when it says total received October the 1st, 2019, that was intended to be October the 1st, 2020 through September the 30th, 2021. Am I reading that right? That we have, yeah, So if you look where it says total received, we just happen to have the wrong year on there. That should be total received October the 1st, 2020 through, and the date on this report is March the 4th. So that's really a October 2020 to March 2021 revenue, and then the due to be paid out there. So anyhow, the lesson here is $1.2 million coming into the TIF in 2020 tax year and $628,000 going out. I'm going to just take page by page. Any questions on that page? Okay. Next page is the Power Center. Power Center is a smaller geography. Base value there was $12 million. 2020 taxable value was $125 million, which means we had a captured value, that's our new growth, our increment, if you will, of $113 million. And then that meant that on the city side, we had $382,000 of revenue, $265,000 on the Kaufman County side. All of that combines to a total collected in that 569 range there. And then you can see the total due to be paid out is $504,000. So as we've discussed a couple of times, you might think of the TIF as profitable. and it's kicking off more money than we've obligated to developers. And then you got to look at the power center and say, well, we're just barely there, right? We're just barely doing okay because almost all the money in the power center has been promised out to developers. And so you kind of got to read it in that fashion. So anyhow, that's a little review of those two sheets. Any questions on the power center one? Okay. Now I'm going to go get complicated on you because this is a preliminary report for next year. So now I'm going to be on the one that says City of Terrell Overview of Taxes, Certified Totals 2021 tax year, and this is as of July 21, 2021, okay? So now I'm looking forward, and I'm saying, okay, if I take January 1, 2020, assessed values, of which there are some people still going down to the appraisal district and venting their complaint that they don't like their valuations. That's still going on down there. But nevertheless, we did get a certified taxable value of $1,732,146,320. There's a TIF captured value there of 254. And I'm going to tell you that number's going to float around a little bit due to challenges and that sort of thing. So whether we end up around 260 or we rather end up 254, a thing for you to think about is to say, now wait a minute here. The captured value last time was the 188 million, right? So you go back to last year's report and say, wow, man, we went from 188 million to 254, and I've got another report that says that might be around 260. So the captured value of the TIF's growing. And you can just kind of think about what's been going on at Crossroads and say, okay, that makes sense. We've built a few more things between January 1 of 2020 and January 1 of 2021, okay? So that's the reason for that increase. So then you do all of the math down here in the spreadsheet and you say, okay, now how's all that gonna work out? And this is a spreadsheet only concentrating on the city side of the tax increment finance district. So I haven't asked Hal to do the county side of it yet. So let's take a look at the details here. Let's assume our tax rate stays the same, M&O and INS stay the same. That's actually our budget goal for this year, so we're kind of just leaving things as is. That means we would collect $10 million of M&O taxes. It means a little over $1 million of those would be allocated out to the tax increment finance district. In my mind, that's money that never comes into the general fund. That just is money that's diverted to go straight out to the tax increment finance district. And then you can see allocated the PC, that's the power center. And remember, there's real property and business personal property, and you can see those two numbers down there about how much money would go into that. And so you say, okay, well, that makes a little bit of sense. I'm following you so far. But you got to do it also for INS taxes. So that's our 16-cent tax rate. So you can read that on here and you say, oh, okay, the 16-cent tax rate, that's going to generate the city 2.6, almost $2.7 million in INS taxes, of which $297,000 is due to the tax increment finance district, and then the 74 and the 29 are power center related. So that's a nice healthy chunk of money, right? How do I get the totals there? The TIF total would be $1.4 million. Again, that's just for the city. You can compare that to the prior report, which we were right at $1 million. So we're going up substantially this time around, right? So our big vision forward is, hey, wait a minute here. We're gonna get $400,000 of additional city property taxes that go into the tax increment finance district between the 2020 tax year and the 2021 tax year. So that's a message that we're doing well. We got a healthy TIF going here. The power center side of it is basically the exact same conversation. You can see here the total that would go into the power center is $497,000. And again, that's a good news message because you can look at the prior year report and say, oh, the city was only going to put $382,000 into it last year. And in the coming year, it's $497,000. So that's a nice substantial increase in the power center revenue as well. So that's your kind of glance at this page. Again, only done for the city side of it, not done for the county side of it. We're still kind of chewing through all of that process. So any questions about this page? Okay. Next item is How does this look in terms of the borrowing that we've been looking at? So recall that past couple of times we've met, I've been mentioning that the City Council did approve a public advertisement associated with some borrowing. So we've advertised to borrow $22 million as a city. A big chunk of that is road, street, drainage improvements, that sort of thing that doesn't have anything to do with y'all's business here at the Tax Increment Finance District. $3.5 million of that money is a recommendation from our Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation Board. That's the Type B board, and they're recommending to borrow $3.5 million. The TIRZ side of that is $7 million, and so that is the British Flying Training School Museum relocation plus parking and land associated with the parking for us to actually put a parking lot out there, probably more than one parking lot, given the constraints for the McElroy Building / British Flying Training School Museum. So let's take a look at this and see what this last page says. So now I'm on the one that says issuance for TIRZ project. And again, this is kind of a limited analysis because we only gave them, looked at this analysis for the for the upcoming year. We've only included the city side of the TIRZ. So I got a tax year 2019 on here, and you can see the revenue, the pay-as-you-go expenditures. That's what we've promised out to developers. And so the net there was $405,000. Tax year 2020, that's that $1.277 million that I showed you before, with the pay-as-you-go expenditures of $628,000. That's exactly the same information that was on that report I showed you earlier, meaning that we had a net of $649,000. So this is all the stuff that we show to Standard & Poor's when we do borrowing, right? They're giving us a credit rating, and we're showing them this information. So to be conservative, we only showed Standard & Poor's the information associated with the upcoming year of the Tax Increment Finance District on the city side of the revenue. And on the city side of the revenue only, we were projecting, again, that roughly $1.4 million, projecting about $750,000 in expenditures, the net being $700,000. And our estimated debt service here, this version was $366,000. I think I got another version of that same number that's $375,000. And so that gives you kind of the look that we gave Standard & Poor's. So we got our rating back from S&P. S&P says, great, you look good, your rating is unchanged, you're not borrowing too much. And so that was good news. We got that information yesterday based on all of this analysis. So all of that to say, we are going to recommend in your last agenda item that we go ahead and take action on the borrowing. And this financial analysis tells me that you've got more than enough money in the bank, more than enough revenue coming in on a regular basis to do that borrowing. So any questions about your financial status? All right, very good. So Chairman, I'm going to tell you I've completed my item, and we are ready to move on to two Charles Fenner items, which is he's going to give you the updates for 4.2 and 4.3 if you want to introduce those items. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. So we're going to talk a little bit about I'm going to update you on the McElroy building, the building that we've purchased for the British Flying School Museum, and then we'll move into the South Alley project. And so the McElroy building is part of what Mr. Sims was talking about too, and some of that issuance and what we're doing. So if you go to page 5 of your agenda, and I'm sorry for, I think I sent the one that was not formatted. I reformatted right before council last night, but it's okay. It just cuts off some things. I'll tell you what it says though. So let's start with the McElroy building here, the project update. We're currently in the design phase. I know Mr. Mark Thacker was here, gave you a little presentation before, showed you some renderings and where we're at. We're going to be ready for a pre-development meeting in the next couple of weeks. And Mr. Thacker is working with the consultant, the Bridgefine School Museum, as you know, has a architect of their own for the curation. And so they want things placed in a certain area, and so there has to be a close working relationship there. So Mark has been working heavily with those guys to situate things. They're working on some architectural and engineering drawings now, so we'll have that for the bid process. A couple things, I guess the most important thing, we're currently in the construction document phase, as we say, the design phase, beginning to create the detailing of the interior and so forth. We should have a completed set of documents and be close to January bid. There's a couple things that we have going on that are going to affect this. As you know, and I'll be presenting a little bit on the next presentation on the South Alley. We're doing a study on the actual South Alley project to utilize it for some human use and just redevelopment of that area. But also on South Alley, we have another project that's we're working through, and that's moving the utilities out of the right-of-way, the railroad right-of-way, and then redoing the pavement. And so we don't want to be doing those things, really don't need to be doing construction on the McElroy building and going really quick on that, and then starting on the South Alley if we complete the South Alley project, and then the utility moving. So there's a lot of moving parts here that we got to coordinate with. And so that's a big part of this update. So if we go to the next page, you'll just see that he's had some renderings, some side views and wall sections. You've seen the actual rendering. This is, I'll show you just a couple of these. We'll go through it real quick, but that's the side section. And again, these are getting ready to go out. We previously had prepared that color schematic. We saw that. It's being patterned for the detailed drawings. And he said, the next version of the exterior elevation will be a little bit different. So if we move on to the north elevation, we see this nice little building, which is on the page, in the next page. Some of that may change a little bit. It's a good-looking building, and I know he had presented that before. So we move on. He'll be working on the South Alley part of it too, and there'll be some different details and the coloring and so forth. If you move further, we don't have that detail, but you see what we have going on in the South Alley. Part of what he's designing, if you remember, we had talked early on about, the South Alley project is looking at doing reverse entry from Moore Street, so actually utilization of South Alley, so you can enter from the rear too. So there's things going on in the South Alley, and you can enter some buildings from the South Alley. There might be some other stuff going on, and so he's designing that to actually have an entrance to that. We'd also talked at one time of utilizing the top floor of this for some other things. So you'll see we'll have some different renderings soon in color for that, but you can see that he's got that set up for the south entrance. You can just look a little bit on the west elevation side. You can see how it's going to look from, if you're looking at the Lyric Theater, the former Lyric Theater, where Mr. Pena has purchased that building. This is what it'll look like from that side. If you go to the next page, the east elevation, only part of that elevation will be seen. You can see that from the adjacent building with that top story. So it's going to look pretty great down there. So the sections he's drawn will be used for the engineering design for them to put together the plan for the structure, mechanical, and electrical components for the building, so you can kind of see what's going on in there. So he has the museum, of course, the bathroom stuff, elevator there in the back, and the stairway, and so that, and the multi-purpose room up there. So, so in the next month or so, we should be moving into seeing the colored elevations, some more of the interior elevations as he's working with the architects, the museum architects, and then some basic museum components. And as you know, those curators and those type of people, they get very excited, so they'll be wanting to show you what they have. So that's it. Any questions on that quick summary and overview of where we're at? I'll tell you, Mr. Thacker's doing a fantastic job in keeping us up to date. He is also working with us on the paddock board. You know, we do a facade program on the paddock board, our Downtown Improvement Corporation, and he has been reviewing and giving recommendations for several of our downtown facades in the Central Business District and in our downtown zoning. If you remember the city, and we talked before, the city had rezoned about 250 properties into the downtown zoning district, and those have to have historical characteristics to them when they build or renovate. And so he's working with people as far as Newton Street and around to give them some design recommendations. So that's great, because we're taking a lot of what we're doing with this building and we're expanding out into different areas and things like that with these buildings. He's looked at Houston Smith's building. He's looked at Mr. Torres's building down west, and so it's a good thing. So we have a lot going on with him too. Let's move into the ash lime presentation real quick. Oh, thank you. So ash lime is the consultant that we're using to do well, let's just say, if we go, let's say, here's what it is. Tire 7 block, the Hattie Street 34 section, you know, the auto parts store that very far on the west side, and then you have down to 34. That's your section right there that you're looking at. 4-block core area from Rockwall to Virginia. And so what is ash lime doing again? So they're creating reality for use of that and realistic use of the South Alley. We're not just drawing pretty pictures, but we're looking at ways to reuse some of the area down in South Alley, how we can use some of the vacant areas, how we can locate some, have central location of simple things like trash, parking, and so forth. Create the renderings around certain concepts that they're hearing and what they're putting together. They're making policy recommendations and supporting some of the implementation and creating that. That's what they're doing in this phase, and basically those policy recommendations will be some things like they'll take the Central Business District, zoning district ordinance that we have, and they'll look at that and they'll say, you may want to consider this because it's in the Central Business District, the South Alley, and you know, for signage or for certain uses, and think about how you can change it. Are you going to do an overlay of that area? You're going to create a South Alley district or a corridor or something. So that's part of what they're doing, plus the pretty pictures and some other uses that they have experience with. So what they're not doing is the engineering planning for this area. They do have engineers that they work with, but they're not doing that, and they're not doing plans for the downtown as a whole. As you know, we have, like I said, we have a project going on with moving some of these utilities out of the right-of-way, so that's a different engineering firm that we're using to do that, and the repavement of South Alley and the maybe circulation of that area. So that's a different engineer, and that involves the railroad. We're also using another engineer to look at our town center area section just south of that area, which will tie into some of this. And then we're also having just approved another company to do the complete streets that will somewhat tie into this. And that complete street program will also be engineered for some of the quiet zones stuff that we'll be looking at too. And so they have all these schematics, and they're incorporating those into some of their design work, and that's what we talk about being realistic. Just like the McElroy, you know, you can't just be constructing and working on the construction of the building if we're doing some stuff on South Alley, and if we're like, you know, just a wild concept of turning it into a one-way street area or more pedestrian friendly and things like that. So there's a lot of consideration here, but they are not creating those plans at this point. They're, for anything, they're just working through. So the quiet zones, just talking about that, the federal, the Railroad Administration. So if we talk about that a little bit too, that's gonna, they have to work closely with our consultant that's gonna be working on some of the quiet zones, just because of the crossings and the changes that we have to make. What that may do to an area, as you'll see in this little presentation, you may have an area where the recommendation would be, well, you have plenty of area for outdoor use, for seating, for somebody to have a restaurant, outdoor restaurant, but then you have to think about parking, you have to think how close you are to the dumpsters, where's the sidewalk, where's the landscape, and so forth. And so that's a big deal that they have to work through the safety and so forth. So they've interviewed several people, and as you'll know, a couple things they've heard: the noise associated with the trains, the lack of public space, the usable event space in downtown, parking is a problem, and just having an experience in the alley. The other part of that is, that utilitarian type of use is what alleys are used for a lot of times: trash, delivery, things like that. Well, power lines, storm drains, gutters are in disrepair. We have some issues there. So there's some things that we can look at that incorporate this human outdoor pedestrian friendly use, along with good use of storm drainage and surface conditions and so forth. So recommendations, this is where we're at right now. And again, we don't have anything developed as a plan. We have some pictures, but their final product's not developed for total use, but to plan it from. But complete streets, infrastructure, the bike lanes, looking at that, at-grade sidewalks possibly there, flexible parking, and we're working with parking downtown as a whole. We have a lot going on, and looking at areas for capturing some of the property for parking. Bioswales, linear wetlands, that's something we're talking about when we have water moving around. How can we do some of those bioswales are basically just natural capture of water, and how we can utilize that, because there's some things that they have plans for downtown to use as little small garden areas, and where they just do pop-up gardens and things like that. They can incorporate some of that design into some of your infrastructure design. Safety for lighting, and some design improvements down there. Utility and location dumpsters are a big deal, believe it or not. Obviously, you have to have them in a certain area. There's a lot of thought that has to go into that, as pickup of the trash, where can everybody use a joint dumpster, and the location is relation to the parking. And signage and awnings and facades and so forth, those are big deals too in the recommendations. As I just told you, Mr. Thacker is doing a lot of review on some of the stuff that we're doing that's on the front, and we see a big project and program ahead of us, I think, with some really neat stuff and facades and murals and things like that. Parking, like I said, we're looking at parking from several different standpoints: the overflow, just to the overflow of construction, to just having parking now, to the future parking. And as y'all recall, that we're working with the Anderson building. There'll be a hotel over here, and there'll be some lofts. We're gonna have dedicated parking for that, so we're working through that too. And here's a great picture. So one of the things that we were talking about, and one of the things we've heard, and one of the things we really want to do, is move these utility lines and reduce that clutter and improve that feel. And that's what I said there. The utilitarian, the feel, you use these alleys for certain things, and it's just basically that. The use, you put it behind, and put the dumpsters behind, you put the utilities behind, and so forth. And so burying these power lines, which is a huge recommendation, can reduce that clutter, can improve the look and the feel, protect from wind and storms, and really create a lot more use for those little areas that you didn't think could be utilized for commerce or just anything, to create an event, to create an experience. And so you can see there the before and after picture that these on this deal where this slide where they move those. That's our stuff. It's just kind of showing you what we have in the alley. So these are some of these areas highlighted. They're highlighted opportunities. I'll go through those real quick. The reds, in the yellow orange, they're highlighted opportunities. And kind of just this is not a plan yet. This is just kind of some of the stuff where we're going. So you look at this area, and that formatting, which is South Alley and Francis. That's where I reformatted. I didn't give you the right one. But anyway, this is the South Alley, Francis. You know where this area is. It's highlighted right there. Existing conditions, here's just an opportunity that you may use. Something like this. There's little pop-up areas where they have little seating, little pocket park areas, just all kinds of little different things that can be done and be done simple. That area. This is an area, this is the city property right across from the Anderson building. And this is just some other uses. Landscape, they have some parking, just playground area that can go, playground equipment that can go up, books, little pop-up libraries, just things like that. Here's the corner of we don't really want to do too much with this area because this is Mike Sims's favorite building in the whole city of Terrell. It's Cowboys right there on the corner of South Alley and Virginia. But if you look at this area and you just think, what can we do? I've talked with Mr. Smith, Houston Smith. He owns a few of those buildings right there, and he's wanted to do some things too, and he's been looking at redoing his facade. And we were actually talking about utilization of that South Alley entrance and stuff. So a lot of people are talking and on board with what's going on. But if you look at, I mean, it could be something like the mural. It could be something like your entryway to South Alley with the landscape, streetscape for pedestrian-friendly piece. Create, put out awnings, seating, all kinds of things could change the total look of that. You could change it to one way or a section of it. These are just opportunities. Just thinking. And that is a thank you. So that's where we are with with Ashbus Line. They've made some preliminary recommendations, and like I said, they've read through our ordinances and they've shown us some things that can happen. Now those things can't happen without making some changes and some recommendations. But that's where we're at with them right now in this phase. We think that we'll be continuing on with them in other phases to not only do those policy recommendations and have the renderings and have the map, but move into some more detail of, okay, this area can specifically be used for this and this is how it can be designed, but we're not at that phase with them now. So there's a lot of moving parts out there, a lot of things happening, a lot of good stuff, a lot of exciting things, and a lot of things that people want to see done and long overdue. So any questions on that? Oh, yeah.
I just live to torment Dawn. Just make Dawn go find a slide.
I thought you wanted the cowboy slide back.
No, I don't need the cowboy slide back.
Horses, yeah, that's
No,
I'm talking about the cowboy store, not the horses. Cowboy store, not the horses. It was a bus stop, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm good. Nope, we got one more item. Power line burial. So I met with Encore, Cindy Tayum, and Randy Voigt. A lot of you guys know them. And they're generating a price tag right now to take power lines down from Adelaide to Francis. Why Adelaide to Francis? Well, that's the core three streets, right? I got Adelaide, Catherine, Francis. So 2 full blocks, and one of those full blocks is behind the McRoy building. The other one is adjacent to that, obviously. If I remove the power lines in that area, then it becomes much easier for us to construct the McElroy building. And so part of the reason for this whole presentation is to say, okay, imagine constructing the McElroy building, and it's kind of hard to see, but on your image, it's the one that has the fire escape on it. So that's the top right one. That top right corner right there, see how the power lines are like placed in a nice strategic manner so that if you were to try to demo the back wall of that building, you would be in a world of hurt because you'd be trying to work between those power lines and that wall. So one of our construction concerns is that you can certainly ask a construction company to work in that kind of an environment. We think that's going to raise our costs of construction meaningfully, and obviously one of the things we want to do is bring the McElroy construction in at a good price. I can't easily work from the US 80 side because that means shutting down US 80, and obviously that's a TxDOT road and that's more fraught with problems to do that. So we are getting a design. I think in the next 30 days I'll have a design and a price tag from Encore for getting those power lines down. I'm just sort of highlighting that project's really connected to the McElroy building because let's say that project costs me something in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I guarantee it will. Well, it may also save me something in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to construct the building because it's going to change how the contractor enters the space and how they work in that space. So I just want to highlight that of a particular concern. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go to our next item. So you know me, I always like to give you a chance to look at something before you vote on it. So we're going to look at this today, and then we'll have another meeting soon to come back and vote on Resolution 2021-4. I think I labeled it as Resolution 2021-3 on the draft in front of you, but me and Dawn will. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, I've got the old version. Okay, all right. So you're all right. You're up to snuff there. All right. So I'm going to go through the resolutions. So the resolution's in the packet, I think. Is that right? Okay. So if I go through the resolution in the packet. If I go through the resolution in the packet, this is what we're aiming for to vote on at your next meeting. And here we go. So I won't go through the header there. It's kind of long, but this is a resolution of the TIF and the Power Center authorizing the use of funds in a certain way. So you got a whereas here about the history. You've got your ordinance, so those are the first two. The third whereas reviews the percentages of revenue from each of the taxes that go in. So you can see all those 75% for city, 50% for county in there. We repeat the information to you about your Second Amendment. We repeat to you Resolution 2019-3, which is where we started down this path about working on the McElroy building and relocating downtown. And then we've got resolution number 1044 from the City Council, which is that intent to borrow funds that I mentioned earlier, so that shows up as an attachment to this document. The last whereas on that page is basically sort of where we're going. The TIF board wanting to recommend approval of the funds to facilitate all of that list of things we want to do downtown with the McElroy building. And then we come back around and say, okay, now therefore, that's my favorite part of all of our resolutions. Now therefore, what are we going to do? We're going to agree with the preamble. That's simple enough. Then we're going to meet the state law requirement, right? Because we're going to say that, hey, there's a list of projects attached, and we agree with those list of projects. So we're going to be consistent with that by repeating Resolution 1044. Section 3 is where we really get interesting. So the Board of Directors of the Tax Increment Refinance Zone Number 1 recommends the City Council approve the expenditures of TIRZ and Power Center funds for a base total of $7 million, plus associated finance costs for professional fees, water and sewer, utility access, franchise utility relocation, land acquisition, site preparation, parking facilities, and building constructions necessary for relocation of the British Flying Training School Museum in an amount currently estimated to be $375,000 annually. So if I borrow $7 million over 30 years, even if I don't get a good interest rate, I'm still going to end up around $375 for the annual costs of that borrowing. So that's really the meat of what you're saying to the City Council, is that you're content with that. Section 4 is the budget language associated with that, which is basically saying you're authorizing that transfer into the interest and sinking fund. Because I'm forever editing the things we hand out, I noticed that we actually should have stated this in terms of the Board of Directors of the Tax Increment Refinance Zone Number 1 and the Power Center Board recommend City Council, but that's okay. We can make that little edit before next time. You want both boards to say the equivalent thing to City Council. So again, we're big fans of not pressuring boards into things. So you guys give me any criticism, concerns, comments, whatever might be on your mind, and we'll be responsive to that in whatever we bring back to you for an opportunity to vote on this soon. So good question. I think it's the worst kept secret in downtown that we bought the Chapman building. Everybody still calls it the Chapman building, but everybody knows we bought that. And I've been talking to quite a few different business owners who are, they're sort of planning on, hey, this is great. We're going to have new people come downtown. How are we going to react to that? What are we going to do? Louis Pena, who's doing the Anderson building, he and I have talked about different strategies for co-marketing. He's actually trying to find a British-themed restaurant that he could put in on the first floor of his building, so that would be a kind of a neat little, marketing match. Then I talked to the French Soiree about it. They're excited about it because it gives people another reason to come in downtown. The Soldier's Daughter, which is the new restaurant that's coming in where the Country Kitchen location used to be. Soldier's Daughter is, they're excited about it. Matt Malone and Justin Fivecoat have that vacant, I'll call it the piece of junk at 107 Moore. The very junky building that we famously said, hey, we got to sticker this or it's going to come down, right? So you probably noticed that at one point over the last couple of years. They're excited about it because it really makes their investment, right? Because now instead of having a building where we're not quite sure why people would come here, now they're going to have a building right next to a big attraction. So yeah, we're getting some good response there. Charles mentioned Ash Lime. Ash Lime is basically tasked with talking to a lot of folks downtown to get their input on the South Alley project. I think that's really important because a lot of those landowners are, man, they're pretty dug in and they're pretty disinterested. Some of them are, and not the renters, right? The people renting the property, they're excited about it, right? But some of those owners are pretty old guard and they're going to take a little pushing to get us to get where we need to go. I'd say the most difficult part of this is a thing council voted on last night, which is Kimley Horn being under contract with us to do the quiet zone side of the study. We approved the very most initial beginning phase of that project, and that is $105,000 to do the quiet zone analysis in downtown. And there's a public involvement component associated with that, where a professional firm that has done this sort of thing for Dallas Area Rapid Transit in the past, where they do big station developments like Mockingbird, where they're not just doing a rail station, they're doing a rail station with development around it. They use a firm called JBJ Management for their public involvement. I've interacted with those guys before, so we're bringing them in to kind of help facilitate some of the public involvement, because it does take some hand-holding to say, hey, guess what? We're going to rip everything up around you for a while, and here's what's going to happen, and the future is better than the present. What can we do? What are the little nuances of well, you know what, I'm gonna have to have deliveries between 11 a.m. and blah, 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 you know, how can we facilitate that sort of thing. So JBJ Management is good at that kind of hand-holding, and we'll have them help us out through that public involvement process. That's a contract that the city has that's funded by the county bond program. And so that is kind of our Get Started program on that topic. Great question.
Is the burying of the lines, is that going to be a shared expense with any other property owners?
I can't slough that off on individual property owners. On the other hand, it's going to cause some of them some problems. And so I'll say it like this. Let's say you happen to be in a building downtown where the entire electrical system is circa 1932. Yeah, all right? That means when I take all of that stuff down and I upgrade that power system, and then we go to plug that back in your breaker box, then I may not be taking something I can put directly back into your system. So I think the standard thing that we've done in cases like that is to recommend that the property owner basically have a two-step system, and I'm going to use the dumb guy's way of explaining it. I got my power from the power line. I better not plug that into my old ancient breaker box. I better buy a new device and essentially have a breaker for the entire building, okay? And my own electrical system. I'm going to plug that into this new breaker box, and that new breaker box is going to have some sort of translation in it to then have a wire that goes over to my old breaker box. That apparently works. Don't ask me why, but that apparently is a workable strategy. And so there's going to be some inside the wall costs for some of these folks. And some of these folks have upgraded their electrical and won't need it. So like the Mississippi building has all new electrical in it. They're not going to have that problem. But there's going to be a handful of folks that have some problems with that. So.
Will the burying of the lines increase property value?
Well, I'm going to say I'm certainly going to promote the idea that every public infrastructure improvement we make downtown will increase property values downtown. So I'm going to give you an easy yes. You know, can I directly tie that down and, you know, measure that in some specific way? I think it's the package of improvements that's going to do it, because I think 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're going to look at property downtown and say, now, wait a minute here. I've got a museum that's operating. I've got these power lines down. I've got an improved parking situation. We may or may not have gotten, or remember, whenever we talk quiet zone and complete streets, we have the seed money and the local match identified. We've got to do all of this engineering work, get permission from the federal government, and get environmental studies done and all that jazz. That takes a long time. But then when we're ready to build it, we've got to match our seed money and our local match money with grants from other entities, right? So I've got to go to Regional Transportation Council, TxDOT, Federal Highway, blah, 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 and I got to go try to find the grant money that matches with our seed money. So the joke for that is it's called faith-based engineering. I'm engineering on faith that I will get a grant in the future. So let's say we're great. We get all that work done, and we can get the grant, and we can build all this stuff in the next 3 to 5 years. Awesome. But I can't guarantee that because I don't know when I'm getting the grant. Let's say the grant guys tell me, congratulations, we're going to give you the money, and it's going to be 7 years from now. Well, now we're all frustrated, but we know when we're getting the grant, right? So I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say we're going to finish in 3 to 5 years. I think your property values go up when we're done with all of this, right? The utility line and the building and the complete streets and the quiet zone and the downtown parking. Once the fleet of all of that's done, I think that's when property values change downtown in a meaningful way. So long answer, short answer is yes. Yeah. Right. So I'd say this is leadership with both carrot and sticks, okay? So carrot examples. Carrot examples would be we're working on a facade program under the Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation. I've got two buildings downtown where Charles has been ordained by the Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation to negotiate with those landowners to try to get them a facade grant. And so he's gone to them and he said, okay, the paddock board kind of wants to be in this world about how much that incentive will be, but you need to do these things and you really got to do these things. So as you can imagine, that's quite the bumping of heads conversation, but Charles is good at that, and we're kind of working through that process to get those two people where we need them to be. The carrot there is that the paddock board is willing to spend about $150,000 a year on incentives to incent people to do things that match up with our downtown plans. So that would be carrot. On the stick side of it, it may be that in the future, to get a certificate of occupancy downtown for something new, we might say, look, in the past, we've given you a pass on the rear entry. From a fire standpoint, it was only a required exit. It may be that from time to time, we have some building layouts that are amenable to, you know what, we're really going to require you to also have a rear entry back here as a condition of a new CO. How often we'll be able to do that, I don't want to guarantee that right now. Sometimes there might be some dumpster-related issues going there, and so I'll give you the example of saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna help clean up the back, and we're gonna require you to put your trash cans over at this consolidated dumpster location over here, and we're not gonna allow you to do X, Y, Z with that building unless you, you know, kind of follow our lead there. So we'll have some sticks, we'll have some carrots, and it won't be perfect, but we'll get what we can out of that. So it's a good question because it's really our biggest problem downtown, right? My biggest problem downtown is a lack of motivated old school owners. And I'll just give you the Louis Pena example. Louis bought that building after having done the due diligence with the city to know that he really can't do what he wants to in that building until we dig up the water, sewer, and replace it with new. And that's going to allow us during that construction project to install the pipes necessary for him to have a modern fire suppression system and the pit necessary for him to have a modern grease trap. Well, you know, he's now lining up what he wants to do with the Anderson building so that our work and his work can match up, and when it's done, we've made those improvements. That's more foresight and planning than a lot of our downtown business owners. I mean, it just really is. He's stepping his game up, and he's saying, hey, I'm going to look for opportunity to get this matched up. I haven't really always had folks downtown who wanted to be proactive in that way. So I think that's the nice way of saying I got some problem children down there. Anything else? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll ask Dawn to just reach out to everybody, see if we can find another opportunity for a meeting fairly soon. Sounds like everybody's generally content with this resolution. I think I'm reading that correctly here, and we'll get it scheduled for a vote soon, and let us move along with this.